Hey everybody, it's Tracy, and I want to talk about social gaming, social sports books, and I've kind of touched on the periphery of those before, and the interplay with crypto, right? And you have, social gaming platforms like Stake, Fliff, and a number of others, and the question is like, how do they operate without a license? Because they're not licensed. And so it comes down to a consideration, an evaluation of consideration, chance, and value, right? Consideration being, do you have to pay to play? Chance being, is it a game of skill or chance? And then value being, what are you receiving if you win, right? And there's no direct regulation that governs social gaming. And it's kind of this hodgepodge of court decisions and things like that. But, the general kind of like framework is that you have to create sort of this captive ecosystem, right? And how does that work? So, one, in terms of consideration, people can go on and you can allow them to purchase tokens, like to play on the platform. And typically that takes the form of two things typically referred to as gold and sweeps. Gold being like the free ones you get or you earn that allows you to play the games, and then sweeps with tokens which have like an intrinsic value of entering you into some sort of contest that would result in a prize, which I'll get to in a minute. And those tokens, while they could be blockchain token, actual crypto, it's there's some nuance to it, which I'll touch upon. And then game of skill versus game of chance, right? Like obviously all casino, like table games, things of that nature are games of chance and are regulated, and therefore like offering a direct prize for like, hitting a slot machine, right? Or a jackpot in a slot wouldn't be allowed, irrespective of how you pay that out. Same with like sports wagering, which is governed state by state, and each state has their own interpretation of what that means, and it's by and large regulated and requires a license. Lastly, you have the daily fantasy, which I've talked about before, which is exempt, at the federal level from regulation and available in literally all but 4 states. And so you can offer like the daily fantasy because it's viewed as a game of skill in so much that it's peer to peer, right? And it's just construed as being so. So it's sort of the outlier, and a lot of these platforms like Fliff like kind of try to incorporate all three. So how do you make it work, right? Generally speaking, you have to adopt to incentivize people to play and continue to play and buy tokens, right, from you, like the sweeps tokens, is to gamify the experience a bit, right? In the sense that, if I'm on a sports book and like I pick a winner and I'm awarded, X amount of tokens, well, what does that get me, right? And I mentioned the ecosystem, like the captive ecosystem, right? Because the caveat to all of this, and like the only like truly decided factor, is that the tokens, as it states today, the tokens can't be pulled out or otherwise used and sold like on a secondary market. Like you have to create, even if it was like blockchain based, right? To allow or foster a secondary market would conceivably create the value element of winning, right, which would trigger gaming regulation. And so like Fliff tokens, right, or anything, it's all just captive. Like, yeah, maybe it's blockchain based, but I can't sell them to anybody. In theory you could sell the account, which was even referenced in a one court decision emanating out of Chicago, but I can't sell like the tokens on like DEX or anything like that. So it's really sort of prohibitive in that sense, right? you don't know what your wallet is. You don't know how to transfer them. There's no functionality to transfer them. But if you could, then I think that's where you trigger the, you trigger gaming regulation and the need for a license. And you also probably implicate like a number of like payments and AML compliance, like MSB registration, things of that nature, possibly money transmitter licensing in the States and so on and so forth, right? And this is really appertinent in this discussion is to the United States. Because you look at Stake, like outside the United States, and it's sort of like, it's licensed, but you can take the tokens out, sell them, do whatever you want. So social gaming, if you want to fly under the radar and like not licensed, you basically can't allow people to sell the tokens or redeem them for cash, right? How you make money and how you like organically grow the platform is that you adopt this inherent like sweepstakes model with embedded within the functionality of different like casino type gaming, right? So, you've heard of like progressive slots or, like even as it relates to sports betting, right? Your player or users, winnings or like achievements in terms of like, betting correctly over series game offers them entry. Not only can it offer them additional tokens, which again is in consideration, but it can offer them entry into like a sweepstakes type environment where they would in turn, their continued performance would increase their chances. And then at some predetermined time, in a winner of the sweepstakes could receive like some kind of value, right? Beyond just like the token, right? That value could really be anything, but it's based more upon, my performance. Like if I hit, a 6-leg parlay and whatever, and I make X amount over X amount of time, then, I get entry into this sweepstakes, and then it's sort of chance from there. And then I win and I get loot box or whatever it is, right? But it could be something real, right? It could be cash. So that's sort of the nuance. And that's really the only way to kind of grow these things like organically. And you see, to draw the parallel, like you look at like apps like Ember, right? In the crypto world where, they almost have these trading contests, right? And it's like, you can play for free or there's like a small entry fee, and it's really just like sweepstakes, right? And it's also a game of skill. And so, and then you can win something, like BTC, which you could withdraw at, should you be successful or just lucky, right? And like, that's the nuance. But of course, if you do that, right, each state has its own requirements vis-a-vis sweepstakes, right? Like in terms of disclosure, in terms of, some states require like a registration, which is very minimal. But that in and of itself is a whole framework that you have to be, conscious of and have the right stuff on your website together with the right, very specific disclaimers. And that's going to actually vary by the type of game that you're offering, right? And, then the peer-to-peer fantasy, daily fantasy stuff is sort of like on its own, and you could, work alongside and compete with, a DraftKings or something like that. But the big takeaway is like for social gaming is like you have to keep it captive, right? Like, as much as like you want to create like, the win token and like use that and people could move it out of their wallet and sell it on a DEX or whatever. Right now you can't, because that's going to come back and say, well, you're awarding people value, right? And if they bring it back in, then they paid consideration. So that's sort of the lay of the land. And it can be wildly popular. Like you see like, Stake and Fliff like really doing well, but they've got a lot of players, and like the sweepstakes model and like these contests are massive, winners for them because they got real prizes attached to it. So that's the lowdown on social gaming. If you have any questions, definitely hit me up, adam@adamtracy.io. I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.